Welcome to Construction Champions Podcast, where we are burning the house down and rebuilding it twice a week. I'm your host, Rod Nussbaum, and I am here to help you become the champion that you're meant to be. Along with our amazing guests along the way, we will provide you with the resources, the latest and greatest. You will sit down with disruptors in the construction industry. And my goal from day one has always been to change the mindset around the construction industry. No more where we let the 3% of bad apes dictate the entire reputation of. Welcome back, Construction Champions, to another episode. We're just like the intro says, we're burning the house down. It's what I created this podcast for, was to change the mindset around the construction industry. You're not here for me, I'm just Ron Nussbaum. I'm just the host. I like to say I'm the facilitator of some of the greatest conversations around construction and business that have ever been. So you show up for our amazing guests. I want to thank you for doing that. Wherever you are listening, whether it's on YouTube, any of the major podcast platforms out there, or on Reese Across America Radio, we are excited to have you here with us today for this conversation. And let's get right into it. Ryan, it is great to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Ron. Appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Before we dive into it, why don't you introduce yourself to all the construction champions out there listening?
That is awesome. And I will tell you, it's going to be interesting because you're going to hear my background and your construction folks are going to be like, what the heck is going on here? Who is this guy that Ron got on his show? But like you said, I'm Ryan Hogan, lifelong entrepreneur, and Ron, you and I have we have some overlaps in our careers because both of us have served for the military. Obviously, you went to Marines, you had to get somewhere, so we were the ones that took you. I've been in the Navy now 23 years. The last 8 years have been in the reserves, but also a lifelong entrepreneur. And the one thing that's been consistent throughout the journey is that the business has always been the vehicle for whatever my goals were. And so, it started off in a t-shirt business, and we went from t-shirts into a zombie run, which was called Run for Your Lives. It grew very quick, 0 to about $8 million over 3 years. And then, unlike zombies, it died. It just fell off the face of the earth, made every mistake in the book, hired and still love all of my friends. But because they're your friends, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make for great people inside of your organization. Didn't understand, couldn't even spell P&L at the time. So there was this whole thing of didn't know how to operate a business. And it took off and it collapsed just as fast as it took off. It took about 3-year hiatus, got picked up for a commissioning program in the Navy called Stay 21 or Seaman to Admiral. Did that for a little bit. And then launched my next company, and that one was called Hunt a Killer, which was an immersive murder mystery experience. And the whole thing there was that we used to send out clues, items, correspondence each month, grew that, avoided the mistakes from 0 to 10 million, then made all new mistakes from 10 to 50 million, which was just mind blowing. And then sold it. I sold that company last year. Had a mentor come to me and he was like, pick your favorite line item on your P&L, go do that. And for me, it was people. But I really saw the recruiting industry of all industries as an industry that was ripe for disruption. And so that's what I do today. A very short intro, Ryan Hogan, co-founder and CEO of Talent Harbor.
Awesome. Well, I always love when we get outside opinions on the construction industry, because I believe that's where there's a lot of growth that can happen. It's not just about looking in the mirror. It's also about looking at what other people are saying and see that haven't been so ingrained in what we do in this space. So I always love a fresh perspective, even if it comes from the Navy. Sometimes we got to get along for the greater good of the entire industry, man. So I'm going to ask you the $1 million question. And that is, what makes a construction champion?
This is it's a great question, and here's what we've seen, right? So I've had this new company up for about a year now, and my co-founder is a 25-year career recruiter, incredible at everything pertaining to recruiting. And what happened was, about 6 months into this journey, we realized that most of the companies that we were serving were from the home service space and the construction space. And so I've been in this kind of rare, I've had this rare opportunity to look from the outside in and look at the companies that have been incredibly successful. And so the answer to your $1 million question is, a construction champion is someone that cares, and they care mainly about two things. One, they care about their people. They're setting a culture. They're bringing the right people into their organization, the care and the feeding, and they're just setting the standard. And the second thing is they care about their customers. And this has been really interesting to observe, because when I've gotten into new industries, I always think that it's going to be dramatically different. But business has been consistent, whether I've been shipping murder mystery experiences or selling t-shirts or doing recruiting, which is the customer comes first, and everything else can take care of itself as long as you're providing an excellent service to the customer. So that's my response to that from the outside looking in. And that's really what we've seen between, like, the okay, the good, and the great construction companies.
That's awesome. And I believe that is true. In that I think we care a lot more than what we even lead on in the construction industry. I find it fascinating that all these construction and home service businesses are finding you. Is that like the original thesis on the business? Or was it just like they're like, man, this Ryan guy, I just want to hang out with him?
I've been told that I am a fun person to go out with and have an incredible evening. I don't think that's the reason. Here's what happened is, through entrepreneurship, here's what I've learned is that you put an idea into the world, and the world, being the market tells you where to go. And so the biggest thing in entrepreneurship is you throw out a concept and then you listen. And as you're listening, you're gonna hear different signals that'll continue to have you pivot. And the pivots keep getting smaller. Like your first pivot, you might be in the completely wrong market, and now you're heading in a different direction. With Hunt to Killer, we thought we were building those experiences for us. Our market for Hunt to Killer was actually 45 to 55-year-old women. We had no idea when we set out on that journey that that was going to be the market. It's very similar with Talent Harbor, is we put this idea into the world, and what's been happening is that more and more of the home service businesses have been finding out about us. And there's two reasons for that. The first is that there's this system called EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Hands down, the best thing that I ever did for any of my companies is implement EOS. It helps you set a vision. It helps you set a 10-year target, helps you understand the core behaviors inside the organization. You set up metrics. It's this amazing framework to operate your system. And across the United States, there's about 800 certified. They've gone through some sort of program with EOS worldwide, that are implementers, and so they come into your organization, and that's a big part of my network. And so we've been primarily referral based. And what we have found through the business model of flat fee recruiting, because at Hunt to Killer, we spent about $1 million on recruiting over that 7-year period. That never made any sense to me. And so, like we talked about earlier, if one of the most important things in business is both finding and retaining world-class talent, but the actual act of recruiting is beyond the reach, expert recruiting, like we can't afford that because it's too expensive, like then we're set up to fail out of the gate. So long-winded, I think it's been two things. One, has nothing to do with going out partying, but number one is that most of our referrals have come from EOS implementers, and I think a lot of the great home service businesses have been taking these frameworks very seriously. And the second is, like, we're the first recruiting company to come out and say, hey, we do that, and we do that at a rate that makes it accessible for small, medium-sized businesses.
Yeah, I love traction. A huge component of it. We talk about it on the show all the time. I've had EOS implementers, people that run EOS on here. I mean, EOS the book Traction steered not a sinking ship, just a very leading ship, and we were able to able to really correct a lot of things and be able to then scale off of that foundation. It's allowed me to buy businesses and implement just implement traction into it and then sell the business for 5x of what I even invested, just because of the simple foundation that is in that book. So I highlight, you're getting very, very good clients when they're coming to you from an EOS referrer, because those are people that understand it and they're putting together a business that's going to be built to last. It's going to be able to stand the test of time.
It's so interesting. There's so many things I could say. We could probably jam on EOS this whole time. The first thing is our recruiters internally. I just found this out yesterday. They've started asking my co-founder Alana, as we're bringing new clients through the door. Their question is, does this company operate on EOS? Because they can tell the difference as we're recruiting for people if those companies are. And just one more point on this whole idea of EOS is that, like, it changed my life. And so, like, you've seen this EOS light, and it sounds like we've all drank this Kool-Aid and we're like salespeople for EOS. We have seen the light. And just like you just said, how it's like works so well in your businesses, I put it into a zombie business where we were at, or not the zombie business. That's why that one didn't work, but made the course correction and put it into the hunt to killer business. And like, that's how we got from 10 million to 50 million, was because we had EOS and some sort of framework. So I don't know. I hate to always be like this big, like, salesperson for EOS, but truly it changed my life. And there's no other way to run a business, really.
Well, yeah, and I know that's not what you're here to talk about, but my last comment on it is there's only 3 books that I recommend everybody read, and the second one's Traction. I believe that is a book that everybody should read, whether you own a business or not. There is stuff in there that even applies to life and how you could run your life better. So
What are
definitely
the other two?
worth the pickup.
What are the other 2 books? Because now I'm dying.
Okay, so 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. It allows you to wrap your mind around what is possible, what the vision can actually be. Number 2, Traction. It will give you the framework and the foundation to be actually able to create that vision that 10X gives you. And then the third is the book on discipline, personal discipline, or the book on excellence. Andy Frisella wrote it. He just renamed it. So now I get like confused, but it is the book on discipline. And what that would do is it will allow you to have the mindset and the mental fortitude to actually apply traction to get through the hard times so you can achieve what 10X shows you is available. And that is why I believe everybody should read those 3 books.
Love it. Okay. All right. Well, one had to go on my list. I've already read the first 2, and that's 100% agree.
So what you're here, you run recruiting. We're here to talk about recruiting in the construction industry. Now that we've got all the nitty gritty out, and the first 10 minutes of this right there, if people would just listen to that and apply it, read a couple books, would change their lives. But
100%.
we're here to change their lives when it comes to recruiting. And I'm dying to ask the question, because you come from an outside perspective. Why do we have this so messed up in the construction industry?
Here's something. What if I told you it's messed up in every industry?
Really?
And here's the thing is that and I don't know why this is, but most folks think they know how to recruit and like what recruiting is and how to vet and how to go out and find people. And like, it is truly, and I'm not saying this because I'm saying this because out of the 400 people that I've hired over the last decade, my batting average was probably worse than 50%. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's consistent. It doesn't matter if it's the home service space or the construction space or any space. It's the same process that if you run this process, much like EOS, if you run the process, you increase your odds at getting it right. And so the first thing is knowing what you need for your organization. And when we sit down and we're like, hey, I need a job description. Someone's like, hey, I need an operations manager. Okay, great. Operations, manager. Let's say they're not running on EOS, because if they were running on EOS, it would go a lot differently. But if they're not, they're just like, that's what I need. Okay, well, we need a job description. Where are we going to go? Well, when I used to write job descriptions, ChatGPT wasn't around yet. And so so that's probably what people are doing today. But I would just go online and rip someone else's job description. I would say, boom, that's the job we need. That's not, if you haven't clearly defined what you need out of the gate, and that is specific to your organization, who is, where is the market? Like, who is the individual that you're serving? What are the goals? What are the milestones? What are the expectations from these roles? And you don't get that by just chat GPTing or copy and pasting from someone else's job description. And so fundamentally, you first have to understand what you need, because if you get that wrong, it doesn't matter whether you hire a rock star. You've hired the wrong person because you didn't know what you needed. And I've gotten that wrong quite a bit throughout my career. So understand what you need, and then going out and finding it. The reality is, a majority of the folks that you're looking for, they're already employed. Why are they employed? Because they're doing an amazing job for the company that they work for, and they're getting compensated for the work that they do. And so understanding where you're finding this talent, which most people post on Indeed, they post on LinkedIn, things like that. Maybe there are certain roles where that is acceptable. One of the areas that's been our primary focus is sales roles. Rock star salespeople, whether they're selling for construction or selling for roofing or plumbing or HVAC, homes and windows, doors, glass. The one thing is that the rock star salespeople are making a butt ton of money at your competitor. And that competitor doesn't want to lose that person. And so when you're really doing good recruiting, you're finding the person that you want, you're picking up the phone, and you're turning your organization into a sales organization, because you're trying to sell that candidate on leaving that comfy job that they're in right now and taking a risk on you. Yes, there's vetting, there's qualification, there's questions that you need to ask. The onboarding program needs to be tight. Where we see most people get it wrong is they don't truly understand what it is that they need, which sets them on the wrong start out of the gate. And then number two, they don't know where to find those humans. And that's probably the 1-2 punch where most organizations are getting this wrong.
So what you're telling me is, if you get it put together and you have a guy from your competitor who's constantly beating you or your sales reps, you need to go have dinner with him.
Yes. It might be, I'll tell you this though. It might be, are you talking about dinner with the other company leader, or with the salesperson that keeps beating your reps?
With the salesperson that keeps beating you.
Oh, you need to take them to Ruth's, Chris. Like that is worth the investment. Think about that. Like every time that I've made a key hire, so these aren't, this is certainly not all 400 people, but let's say there's probably been 3 or 4 key hires that I've made. Like, we went to a steak restaurant in downtown Seattle. We had a bottle of wine. Like, you have to do these things because you're trying to sell them on the opportunity that you have.
Especially a sales rep, at least in my mind, even in the construction industry, all top performing reps were always naturally salespeople, whether they came from within the construction industry or not. Once they got the hang of the construction industry, these were guys that could just sell, and they know it's worth so much money, and they like the construction industry because there is a lot of money in sales in the construction space if you're really good at it. And I think they also look at it as the bar is really low. Like, they know who they can beat up on and how to close deals against people, because the training and the understanding of sales just isn't there.
That's like something else that you just keyed in on there is also like the vetting process, right? So we're kind of having fun with the Ruth Chris. I still do believe in that, by the way. So I'm not just saying that. I think you should wine and dine the folks that are beating your salespeople. And some folks get uncomfortable doing that, right? They're like, oh, well, George down the street, we've been competing against each other for years, and I don't want to make the relationship awkward. At the end of the day, like, you're in business, and the businesses that are going to win are the ones that can attract acquire and retain the top talent. And so like at the end of the day, some of this stuff is just business. But as you're doing those things, you're not just doing them for goodwill. Like the other thing that you're doing during the dinners or however you're meeting these people is you're actually starting to qualify them. Because sometimes you get rock star salespeople that are toxic to organizations. And no matter how much they sell, they will do more damage inside of your organization than they will good. And so as you're having these experiences and you're taking them out and you're trying to figure out who makes sense to make offers for and things like that, you're also getting an idea of like, what is their personality? Because if there's one thing that's consistent among salespeople, they can sell. They can sell themselves. They might not be able to sell your product or your service or whatever it is, but they can sell themselves. They're smooth talkers. They're charismatic. And so having more intimate meetings with people as you're going through this vetting and qualification process will only help improve your odds of making sure that you understand, hey, what makes this person tick? What are the guardrails in which they make their decisions and take their actions? And those are really the things that you're trying to suss out during the conversations.
And I have to just assume, with some of what we've talked about, that you're not setting people up to willy-nilly go do this. Like there's a framework and a science behind the madness of taking somebody out to dinner or having these meetings or interviews and stuff. It's not just like I'm filling this out. Like I'm sure you're helping guys put a framework around this.
Yes. And like there are specific questions. So I'll give you an example. So a lot of the stuff that we do remote. So we're not necessarily going out to dinner and doing some of these things. What we're doing is really starting to put together marketing and sales materials for the opportunities that you have. And we're calling all of the salespeople from your competitors. As long as like one of the questions we have during our kickoff call is like, are there any people in your region that like you've got a close relationship that you don't want to poach from? Once we've got all that stuff checked out, like we're going out to market and we're finding them, we're picking up the phone, we're giving them a call. The process that we put them through it, and this is different based upon the core values of the company. So any good EOS company, they've got their list of 3 to 5 core values. Some may have gone to 7. They shouldn't have. They may have gone to 7, but they've got their core values. And one of the things that we do is we build interview questions specific for each organization that we bring in, because there's different things that we're looking for based upon what we're hearing from the organization. And so that's critically important. The other thing is that it's got to stay consistent. So let's say, one of the core behaviors or core values of your organization is do the right thing. Some of the questions that you're going to develop are around trying to pull out examples of when the do the right thing was a challenge for them. And as you're asking these questions, like you're looking for very specific tells, because you could just go and be like, hey, what is do the right thing? Or do you believe in do the right thing? And someone's going to say, of course, that I have integrity. I always do the right thing. But then you want to go deeper. You want to say something like, hey, can you share an experience over the last 2 years where this core value, an action, decision, something happened in which like this really kind of came to life? And here's some of the cues. What we're watching for is like, we're watching for excitement. We're watching for subtle facial expressions where they're getting excited about the things. They're becoming more animated. And all of these things are saying like, it's truth, it's honest. The deeper, the more detail that they provide, generally, the more honest that feedback or that story is. So we're looking at all these subtle clues. Now, if someone's just like, oh, well, at my last organization, there was a piece of trash on the floor and I picked it up. And you're like, oh, that's great. So anyhow, long-winded. At the end of the day, it's very specific based upon each organization, but it's scientific in the fact that you're asking the same questions and you're trying to go as deep as possible, and you're also looking for subtle clues.
Well, yeah, and when you keep it the same, you can start to create patterns and you start to understand how different people answer different questions. Or say, uh, once we got through traction and everything and implementing EOS and then really figuring out our hiring cycle is one of the biggest things we did that was one of the biggest game changers. Was we used to have whoever that uh say it was like the production manager, sales manager, or office, whoever was the lead for that area, do the first interview. And what we found out was they are the absolute worst, because like me, say when I'm the production manager, I come from an operations side of things. The stuff I like in people typically don't align with what our core values are. The card, like I'm hiring for very like production outcomes. The sales manager is hiring for sales outcomes, and you end up with the wrong people. So what we did was we moved that lead, that manager, to the final interview. And depending on the role and what it looked like, we would have different leaders do all the initial interviewing, and then we would let that manager for that department only do the final interview. So we already knew this person met the company perspective. We did that, and man, did it start to weed out. When you talk about that, a bad sales rep can just wreak havoc. A bad production guy can just wreak havoc. They all can, but it's what they're great at that creates that wreaking of the havoc, is a lot of times what entices us about them. And we're like, oh, this guy is a rock star. He is big, strong, can get the job done. He's got a go-getter attitude, but it's that exact stuff that can be a complete netic of. And we, as the managers of the departments, like you glaze over because all you're seeing is a rock star.
Yeah. I wow. That is some powerful feedback that you just, because like we all hire on bias. And some of the worst decisions, hiring decisions that I ever made, the process that you just talked about in my historical companies, we had that at the end. And the problem with having that core values interview at the end, which we would set up a panel of non-direct reports to evaluate based upon the core values of the organization. And this was at Hunt to Killer. If I interviewed the person first and I said, this is the person, I didn't care what the panel said. And so many times the panel was like, hey, this is no good, but I already had that gut. And here's the reality. That gut is really just likability. That gut is like we have chemistry. And a majority of people hire based upon their gut and that chemistry. So the more you can weed people out before they get to the decision maker, all the better. And if nothing else, and this is one thing that recruiting shops, it not necessarily, like, you don't have to use Talent Harbor, but one thing that recruiting shops do is it puts that buffer and takes out that bias before those candidates ever get to you. So, gosh, your feet, like your story there, I wish I would have had that 10 years ago, because I would have avoided a lot of pain.
Well, I think I mean, it's all stuff that we learn along the way. So I think you bring up a great point there about working with recruiting agencies, or we're working with you. Like, we won't talk in broad. We'll talk about working with you because you're on here. You're the one we're talking to. I'm a huge component of, if you can't do it or you don't understand it, go find an expert and let them do it, and hopefully learn from them as well. Because if you're scaling and growing your business, eventually you probably will have to do this yourself. So your perspective there on how that separates that, I never heard it put that way when we're talking about with recruiting agencies. And that makes so much sense to me, is because by just hiring somebody, basically you're putting that buffer there, this middleman that is going to help you not make these gut decisions that lead to the bad hires.
Yep. Like that's exactly right. And like, there's a lot of reasons to go out and find a recruiting shop. Like, one of those is you just want the amazing talent. Two, like, you haven't built that out as a core competency. But three, like you just said, like, maybe it's just putting the buffer in place. And we put our own buffers in place. Like, we run everybody through a 3-interview process, and then we're also doing an external assessment with our sales roles before they ever see the clients. So, like, we've got a phone screening, and then we've got an experience and background interview. Then we have a core values interview, and we're asking the same questions We also have technologies that are integrated into our process that's giving us feedback in real time of like, this is what we're seeing. We're able to compare candidate space. So we're trying to remove as much of that human bias as possible, even out of our system. So by the time you've seen them, they've gone through 3 interviews. They've gone through a sales specific assessment. So you'll understand like some people are great hunters, some people are great farmers. Like there's all different types of salespeople, and you get an actual external third party report of what this person's capabilities are, what maybe some of their shortfalls might be. So those are the like, hey, you need to watch this, or maybe you don't need that certain capability. But if you do, it's something that you're going to want in the back of your brain. But 100%. And the other thing I'll say is we were talking earlier about this idea of like, you have to know what you want before you go out and find it. That's something that we can help with. Like, we specialize in construction, we specialize in home services. And so like we have all of this data, we have all of these job descriptions, we've had all of this work that when people come to us, especially if they're not operating on EOS, if they come to us and they're like, here's the job description, like our work begins at that point. And I don't mean work as in we're going right out to market. I mean our work as far as like challenging the job description, asking great questions, and really starting to fine tune the things that this organization is looking for. So, yeah, but all great points. I appreciate that.
Well, no, I love that. And I think I know my listeners, so I know what they're saying. So I'm going to ask you, and not that it's a loaded question, but I know this is what they're thinking. Is like, Ryan, that's all great, but where I'm at, we just don't have the people. There's just not the people. I just can't. It doesn't matter if I'm doing it or if you're doing it. The people just don't exist. What would you say to the people that are, I say, stuck in that mindset, but what would you say to them?
There's 2 things, because my co-founder in this, like one of the things that she talks, we had a client come to us. They were from the aviation space, and what they needed was they needed certified mechanics for the company in the aviation field. And so we did some research, we looked around, and we found some competitors. We were like, hey, here's what we can do for you. And they came back and they were like, but we can't poach from our competitors. And then we were like, okay. So then we opened up the circle even larger, and we're like, okay, we've got some room on this. Okay, here's what we can do for you. And they're like, we're not paying for relocation. And we're like, well, this might not work. And so that's the type of engagement that like we're very honest out of the gate if like it's going to work or not. What I will tell you though is 90% of the time, that's something that's a self-limiting belief. That's something that's been created because there's been so much struggle to fill these roles. Maybe you filled them with the wrong people. Maybe you're just not getting the right people through. Therefore, your belief is now that these people don't exist. What I can tell you is we just found 3 commission only, and like these are the hardest roles to fill, commission only. 3 commission only in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. And we did that last week. Last month, we were in Montana. And so when you think about remote, like there's not a lot of humans hanging around Montana. And we were able to fill 2 sales roles. So I guess my point to you is this. What we find more often than not is that it's the perception is not the reality, but that perception has been built due to the inability to find the right people. And that's when you call on us. I will put an asterisk on that too, because the story I just shared with you is we're also brutally honest up front. So when we're having the conversations and as we're doing some of our preemptive research, like if that is true and it's not just a self-limiting belief, like, no, there's only 5 people in the population of your town, that's going to be kind of challenging, but but we're brutally honest out of the gate.
I think that's the best answer you could possibly deliver to that. Because I agree. I think it is. It's a limiting belief, but how you did, like, you gave the reason why it is. And I've never really thought about, like, why do we feel this way? Why do we think it's so hard and there's nobody out there when there are? And it's because we've been put through the ringer. Like we've been on the wrong side of it so long that all we can do is just think there's nobody out there.
Yeah. There, and here's the reality is there are 350 million humans in the United States. Like there is a solution for every problem. Even the aviation example I gave, like we had solutions to that problem. The first thing we did, hey, here are the competitors. We got you all day long. Nope. Like we don't want to get on bad terms and start this talent war. We're like, okay, that's cool. So then we opened our aperture to, call it 400 miles around the area. We were like, bam, we got you more people. And they're like, but we're not paying for relocation. There's a give and take along this process. So like maybe maybe some of the things that they've experienced is the low population, and then we start giving tools and solutions for ways to address those problems. Because there's always a way to solve every problem. It's just putting big brains together and figuring it out.
Awesome, man. I love it. I love it. This has been a fantastic conversation today. For everybody listening, if they wanted to connect with you, learn more about what you do, possibly engage with you in what you do, what's the best ways for them to do that?
I would say best way, just send me an email. It's Ryan, RYAN at talentharbor.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. It's just Ryan E. Hogan, / Ryan E. Hogan. But like here's the other thing, and it sounds like you're very familiar with the EOS ecosystem as well. And there's this belief of like value first. Like that's our go giver is our number one core value. All I want to do is help people. It doesn't matter whether you pick us up or not. Like if you just have questions or you just want a soundboard or you just want to know some of the process, we even give away free materials if you want to run your own recruiting process. Like hit me up and I'll give you my time as much as you need.
Awesome, man. I absolutely love it. All of that will be in the show notes for everybody listening. And I want to thank you for taking the time and being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Ron. Appreciate it. This was fun.
Yeah, it absolutely was fun. So, Construction Champions, that's another episode in the bag where I think we had a very fresh perspective on recruiting around the construction industry. And for any of our long-term listeners and people who have been around for any time, you guys know I love a fresh perspective and an outside take on the construction industry, because that allows us to not just be stuck having the conversation in the mirror with ourselves or looking at how we've always done it. I'll say for me, one of my aha moments was there towards the end when Ryan was talking about why we might feel the way we do when it comes to talent and the scarcity and this mindset around that the people aren't just out there. We just don't have enough people. And it's because we've been in the trenches. We've been fighting that war for who knows how long. And we barely, every time we start to get our head above water or we start to look out, somebody puts in their 2 weeks or somebody doesn't show up, and it becomes this vicious cycle. And it got me thinking of like, how many aspects of our businesses are we creating these limiting beliefs in because of the battle we have been fighting? And it's not allowing us to see clearly on what the actual problem is. As entrepreneurs, it's hard. And we're not experts at everything. And if you claim to be, I guess go look in the mirror, because I mean, I'm a very type A personality and I do not claim to be the expert at everything. I'm very good at what I'm very good at. And I believe those experts made to pick up where my weaknesses are. And it's about surrounding yourself with those. If you're in that battle, you need to figure out how to be able to bring somebody in that can get you out of that battle. When I was in the Marine Corps and we were in Iraq, and I don't talk about this a lot on here, but for some reason, this just relates to what we're saying. I just feel like I need to say this is when you're out there and you get in the crap, we have QRF that can come in. And, when that QRF comes in, they see it from a completely different perspective because they're not necessarily in the battle like you are. They see it from either an absorbing perspective, or they see it as they roll it up. and they can see the battlefield clearly. While you're immersed in the single battle, you have somebody that can come in, that you can call, that can look at stuff from a holistic perspective. I think that matters. I think looking at it from that perspective is is different than what we've kind of talked about on here. A lot of times it's like, oh, I understand that we have sort of in there. It's just like we're going to slap a band-aid on truly what the root cause for is why we feel this way. And a lot of times it's just because we've been in the crap for too long that we can barely hold our head above water. And we need somebody that can come in and look at this differently than what we have. So, construction champions, until next time, be the champion you're meant to be.